Hello, I am the Script Doctor. It's time to take a look at The Mandalorian. Please be advised there will be spoilers. If you haven't seen Chapter 3 before watching this review, I suggest pausing this video, check out Chapter 3, and come back for my analysis. Chapter 3, The Sin, starts off strong. In fact, this episode of The Mandalorian is a great improvement over the previous episodes. Its opening scene actually accomplishes more between the Mandalorian and the baby Minch than the entirety of Chapter 2. The best we could have hoped to extrapolate from Chapter 2 was that the Mandalorian and the baby Minch formed a type of bond. However, at the start of Chapter 3, we get a little exchange between these two characters that is much stronger. In 90 seconds, we see the baby crawl out of its carriage, play with a lever, and the Mandalorian returns the baby back to its carriage. What adds to this scene even more is the fact that the Mandalorian looks back at the baby Minch. While we can't get an expression off the Mandalorian, the look in the baby's face conveys emotion. That emotion is triggered by the Mandalorian turning to face him. Also, the manner in which the Mandalorian speaks and handles the baby says volumes. If the Mandalorian didn't have any emotion to the child, why bother telling it that the knob isn't a toy? Why not return the baby to its carriage and close the doors until he's dropped off with the Imperials? He doesn't do that. He allows the child to see what's going on around it. This is very different compared to that first bounty where the Mandalorian froze the annoying blue guy in carbonite. This episode doubles down on his attachment to the baby. When once our hero claims his reward, he inquires about the Imperial's plans with the child. Apparently, this is out of character, not just for our hero, but for any bounty hunter, as there is a code that states that they are not to inquire about their bounty's future once the job is done. As the baby is taken away, it gives our hero one last look of confusion and longing. The episode has now telegraphed to us, the audience, that we need to see these two characters reunite. The Mandalorian is also dealing with this conflict. Does he honor the bounty hunter's code, or does he do what is right and rescue the child from the remnants of an evil empire? He makes a choice to let the child go, and our hero returns to his people with his prize, one that doesn't go over well with the others in his clan. A larger member even calls out our hero, stating that he cavorts with the same empire that drove them underground. The two have it out until the blacksmith reminds both of them about the value of sticking together for their survival. Also adding in that getting the Beskar back from the Empire is still getting the Beskar back. It's at least being used to help their people instead of serving the Empire. The Mandalorian gets new armor and a cool weapon called the Whistling Birds. He forgoes a signet due to not landing an honorable kill with the Mudhorn. It's a tiny aside that allows the Mandalorian to reveal how his latest bounty wasn't an enemy. It almost gives justification to Chapter 2, but the same result could have been achieved without it. The next little bit is the forging of his armor, and again, we get shown flashbacks of himself as a child fleeing from the Great Purge. It's strong imagery, and we see the confusion and innocence in the baby Minch reflected in the Mandalorian child's flashback. The Mandalorian returns to Greef Karga in spiffy new armor. The rest of the hunters in the bar give him the stink eye, jealous that he accomplished what they could not. We learn that Greef gave every hunter a fob to find the child and how they all failed. He's quite impressed and proud of the Mandalorian because he also earned a few Beskar pieces as a result. Greef is surprised our hero wants another job instead of time off to celebrate. What's interesting is how the Mandalorian wants an assignment as far away as possible, most likely so he'll forget about the baby Minch and maintain the code of the bounty hunter. He gets his assignment and heads back to his ship. He's mere moments before takeoff when he sees the knob on his lever missing. He finds the knob, and as he puts it back on, he can't help but think of the baby Minch, and we're off to the races. We get a solid goal with the Mandalorian. Rescue the baby. What happens next is a really cool collection of set pieces, one including all the bounty hunters that were assigned to capture the child converging on the Mandalorian to steal the bounty for themselves. Our hero achieves his goal with the help of his clan and escapes the planet. As to where they are going, we don't yet know, but we can surmise that he's going to be on the run for most of the remainder of the season. But even though this episode is a vast improvement over the previous ones, there are a bunch of issues and questions to address. For starters, we're back on the tracking fob. The mechanics of this tracking fob are undefined. The fob apparently reactivates when the Mandalorian kidnaps the baby Minch. But if the fob is connected to the baby Minch, why didn't it activate towards the start of the episode when the Mandalorian landed his ship? As soon as he landed on the planet, wouldn't those fobs activate and wouldn't they all converge on the Mandalorian to steal the bounty for themselves? We saw the Trandoshans do this in Chapter 2. Why wasn't that tactic repeated here at the start of this episode? I guess it's just convenient that they didn't care enough to go after the expensive bounty as it's walking right by them. After he turns in the bounty and Greef Karga boasts about how the Mandalorian completed his mission, why do all these bounty hunters retain the original fob? Why not have Greef collect the fobs as he did in the pilot when the Mandalorian turned in his previous bounties? I am also having difficulty figuring out why once the Mandalorian rescues the baby, the fob would reactivate. The job was completed, the Empire got their asset and paid their fee. If the baby was kidnapped, that would start a new job. And given how quickly everything is occurring in this chapter, getting word out regarding the Mandalorian's actions and setting up a bounty should take a little time as opposed to being instant. Also, why would other bounty hunters be after the baby Minch? The Mandalorian already claimed the reward. Do these Imperial remnants have more Beskar? We don't know. What's more likely to happen? They steal the baby back and give it to these Imperials in exchange for what? What reward would there be? Will it be more Beskar or just credits? Or will it be nothing because they gave everything to the Mandalorian? Or will they hold it hostage until the Imperials can pay?
It just raises too many questions.
The fob can't have been targeted for the Mandalorian because that would be a different fob and the orders for the job would have to be given by someone like Greef Karga, and that wasn't shown. This is just the start of the contrivances for this episode. I found it rather convenient that once the Mandalorian decides to rescue the baby, he is able to overhear the child's fate from the Doctor and the Imperial. It's really convenient and lucky how this is the first thing he hears. It would have been a little more suspenseful if he was hearing bits of other conversations and as a result was able to put together the Imperial's plans for the child as he did with this one lucky break. The next big contrivance is the ending when our hero is pinned down. A third party attacks the bounty hunters and it's the Mandalorian clan. How did they know this was happening? They didn't have fobs. They live underground and we got no indication that the Mandalorian signaled for backup. It's a deus ex machina again. Don't get me wrong, it's a great visual set piece, but it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel properly integrated into the story. Had that one Mandalorian said earlier on that he still doesn't like how he's working with the Imperials and that he's going to be watching him, then the clan's arrival would have made sense, because we have a moment that establishes how our hero is being monitored by his cohorts. But we don't get that. They just come out of nowhere in the nick of time. The other option could be that we cut to the Mandalorian clan underground as they observe people running and shouting about a shootout with the Mandalorian hunter and how they've got him surrounded. It might be a little too strong to telegraph their arrival, but it at least bridges the Mandalorian with his clan coming to the rescue. Still, regardless of these issues, Chapter 3 is a very entertaining episode. It also introduces something I wasn't expecting to talk about so soon. In this episode, we learn that the Doctor is planning to take a sample from the baby. We know that Werner Herzog's character wants the child destroyed once the sample is taken. Two things can come of this. Either they clone another baby Minch, but given its rate of growth, it would seem impractical to use them as soldiers even with acceleration, or two, they're going to try and grow midichlorians. This goes back to the poor idea of creating midichlorians in the first place. The idea that the Force is less mystical and more based in science. Not a great choice in my opinion. Had I been present when George Lucas revealed his first draft with this new idea, I would have criticized it, but not in a harsh way. You see, as a writer, you can find yourself in positions where your boss has some ideas that are quite bad and you have to incorporate them. I have faced this many times. The best way to object to a bad idea is to ask questions about the idea. Questions that would lead your boss into realizing that the idea is terrible. Let's do this with the midichlorians. You say to George, hey, this is a neat new thing. So if the midichlorians are a conduit of the Force, does that mean that Jedi can harvest and grow midichlorians and put them into their students? Could it be possible to give a Jedi 10 or 20 times the midichlorians they naturally have to become more powerful? Would this allow us to have artificial Jedi, so to speak? Could we play with the idea of the midichlorians being a drug that these would-be artificial Jedi have to take every so often in order to maintain their connection to the Force? Like those questions? It does two things. One, gives cool options for this new idea to explore, and two, highlights how identifying what makes the Jedi special and rare can be copied and removes what makes the Jedi special in the first place. It also directs one to ask, could everyone be altered to become a Jedi? I have very little doubt that if I were to pose these questions to George Lucas, he would go back to the script and cross out all midichlorian references right away. But could those questions I pose be something that will be used in The Mandalorian? Would it be something that could explain those silly Sith troopers we hear about in The Rise of Skywalker? Time will tell. For now, The Mandalorian has risen a step up story-wise, from mediocre to slightly less mediocre. The contrivances are still there, and I don't think we've seen the last of them, but the show does manage to entertain and is still superior to other Disney Star Wars media. Either way, it's still achieving its main goal, which is to keep an audience interested enough to come back for another episode. Had Chapter 3 been as meaningless as Chapter 2, I would be out, but the story actually moves, stakes are raised, and I want to see what happens next, and hopefully you do as well. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.